A few months ago, I did a video comparing 3 home consoles that I thought were worth modding: the Wii, the original Xbox, and the PlayStation 3. Ultimately, I could not come to a conclusion as to which one was best. It totally depends on who you are, what kind of games you want to play, and so forth. But today, we're going to compare 4 handheld systems: the DS, the 3DS, the PSP, the Nintendo Switch. And I'm going to try to present them in an order that is, in my opinion, worst to first, taking a look at things like the value, the durability of the system, and just how easy it is to mod and what you can do when you have it up and running. To kick things off, I want to talk about the original DS, or the DSi, or the DSi XL like I have here. I think this is the best way to play it because it is so large. I do think that the 3DS XL and the 2DS XL are also the best way to play their corresponding systems. This is very easy to get modded because all you need is a flash card. Now, a lot of people recommend the R4 card. It takes a little bit more to set up. If you really want to plug and play this, you need to buy what I did, which was a 208-in-1 game card, which I have here. Made a whole video on this. Basically, it's 208 games in one. It has all the games you really want on the DS on it. Things like all the Pokemon games, the Mario games, the Zelda games, and so forth that came out on the DS are probably on this card. All you gotta do is pop the card into your DS and it will be able to play any of those games. Now, you take the micro SD card out of the card and you're able to put it on your computer, change up some of the files. You can get a Game Boy and a Game Boy Color emulator running on the DS, but no Game Boy Advance. I think that for the $20 that I paid for that flash card that came preloaded with so many things, that it was much more worth it than going with an R4 card. It does save the games and all the important stuff. It plays just like you were playing it on a cartridge. Now, I think that it provides a fantastic experience on a DS that you can buy for $20 or $30. Very easy to put this package together and get all those DS games. If you're into playing Pokemon games, this is the way to do it. You cannot put this 208-in-1 cartridge into the 3DS, assuming that you're on a relatively recent 3DS firmware and expect it to work. So this is only something that you want to do on a DS or a DSi, regardless of firmware. Now, the next one I want to talk about is actually the Nintendo Switch, which I know is a lot different than many of the other options that I'm going to talk about on this list because it is substantially more pricey. I did pay $200 for this one used. This is not a Switch Lite, it's a traditional Switch. And I was able to mod it with relative ease. I actually talked about that in my previous video if you want to check that out. Because the price hasn't got down yet, I don't think that it's something that you necessarily want to buy strictly for the purpose of carrying around. Many of these systems that are portable, I use strictly for carrying them around. And if ultimately they would break, I'm not out a ton of money, so I feel very comfortable with carrying them, bringing them to work, and so forth because they're not that expensive of systems. And I simply have that struggle in seeing the Switch as a portable system in that fashion. I obviously carried around a case, so it's not quite as portable. The setup process for the mod also requires you to push the payload through a computer every time, so unless you're able to keep the system with enough juice in it to stay alive and not run out of battery, you're going to have to push that payload every single time you power it on, or every single time it runs out of battery. So it struggles in its portability sense because of that, but it does run RetroArch, and because it can run RetroArch, it can run emulators all the way up to the Dreamcast. And it can do that relatively well. The Dreamcast is a little bit spotty yet, but still runs better than it runs on some Android phones. So if you're into really high-end portable emulation, the Switch is the way to go. Just keep in mind that you can't go all too far with it unless you're keeping it attached to a charger and paying attention to that charge. Now, my second favorite console to mod is actually the 3DS. Now, the thing about the 3DS is it's really the first portable system that I modded since I modded a PSP way back in the day. At the time when I modded this, the process was very complicated. Since then, the process has been simplified a bit. It does depend on what firmware you're on. Seems like Nintendo is actively trying to prevent people from modding the system, so that can make it be a little difficult to get it modded if you are on the current firmware, since it seems like they're still battling through that. Whereas something like the PSP or the DS are dead systems where the firmware is no longer being updated. So that is a little bit of a problem with the 3DS, but I talked in a previous video The 3DS, the 2DS, they're so cheap now. The games on them are great. They can play original DS games. And without a doubt, my winner, favorite handheld of all time, the first one that I ever modded, the PSP, which I made a video discussing how you could get a PSP, everything you need to set up and mod it, for $50, which actually puts it at the same price range as the original DS. Now, unlike everything else that has been on this list thus far, the PSP is the one system where technically it's been replaced by a smartphone. You're not going to walk around, seriously walk around, and play 3DS or DS games on your phone. The dual screen really makes emulating these very difficult on a phone. The screen is so compacted when you're emulating a DS game on your phone that while it's possible, while there are 3DS emulators out there now, I don't think it's realistic. You want to have the original device to do it. And of course, the Switch emulators are nowhere near being able to emulate a Switch, particularly on a phone thus far. So the PSP is the only one on this list that truly has been replaced by a phone. But there's something that I absolutely love about these physical buttons, the clicking that comes with them. It just seems like I'm more seriously playing the game when I can feel the buttons in this manner. So the PSP, of course, I made a video talking about how you could pick one of these up for $50 with all of the components you needed to get it modded, including the SD card, which of course is a big part of it. I recommended a 64 gig, but you could go lower if you see fit. This can emulate the Nintendo 64. Not perfectly. It can play PS1 games absolutely flawlessly for 99% of them. However, it won't have the back two triggers you may need, R2 and L2, for some games. And of course, it can emulate older things, such as the Super Nintendo, the Genesis. It can play Game Boy Advance games like the 3DS can. And I think that this screen still looks good today. I'm using a PSP 2000. I think that's the one that I recommend you pick up in my $50 PSP setup video. So that was my take. I'm saying number 4, the DS DSi. Number 3, the Switch, which is plagued by the fact that it is so expensive and I can't take it seriously as a true portable console just because I feel like it's breakable or I'm going to, snap the Joy-Cons off. I don't know. I just can't take it seriously. It's a true portable console without having to carry it around in a bag, and then it just doesn't even feel like a portable console. And then we have the 3DS and then the PSP at my number 1 spot. What is your favorite portable console to mod? I would love to hear from you guys down in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.